What's up guys? Hello YouTube, it's been a while. It's time once more for a new Melee tier list. Now, a lot of people might be asking, why a new Melee tier list? The game hasn't been updated since like 2002, or the PAL version, which we don't even play on. But the game has actually changed. Players play the game differently, and the game is really changed by the addition of Slippy, which was not in my previous tier list considerations. Now, that's just a way to play, but it has changed how people play. Just way more widespread access to different characters, practice. People play way more now than they did before, and I think that changes which character you want to play. New controllers such as Goomwave, Fob, which are obviously with GameCube. This is a Fob. It looks like a GameCube controller, not really one. And then also with more widespread access of box controllers. And I think some characters widely benefit from playing on box controllers. In fact, almost everyone is better on box controllers, but some benefit more than others, and I think that changes where the character strength lies, what character is the best and what's not. So we're just gonna go here in the order I put out. So obviously Bowser is the worst character in the game, by far. He could be in his tier by himself. He's too slow. All he really has is up B out of shield. He has slow jump squat, bad movement, bad hitboxes. Yeah, just terrible. And next up, we have an S tier, as you can see. NordVPN, the sponsor of today's video, is going straight to S tier. The best VPN available to you right now, and I have a great deal. Thank you NordVPN for sponsoring this video. NordVPN is a virtual private network, or a VPN, that encrypts your data and hides your IP address. You can obscure your identity, which is really useful if you're someone like me who travels a lot, have a lot of public Wi-Fi access, airports, etc. So you can always be safely, securely, anonymously. It can help you, jump between regions if you're watching Netflix, if you're watching Crunchyroll, or what you can also do is something I have done many times. When I enter online tournaments, sometimes I'll have really bad routing to someone, and I will use NordVPN to connect to a server. The server can be like in my city. It doesn't add any real ping, but because the routing is different, and because NordVPN is like high-speed servers, it reduces the ping by like 100 sometimes. Not always, but it is a really useful thing to have, because when you're playing in an online tournament like I do, sometimes you just have to play someone and you don't want to play in a super light connection. So I definitely recommend it. There's tons of features, easy to use, there's extensions, there's multiple devices, 24/7 customer support, and it's an awesome deal that I have going right now. You can get a 2-year plan plus a bonus gift with a huge discount. It's risk-free, and Nord offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to try NordVPN, go to nordvpn.com/Leffen or click the link in the description. And yeah, thank you Nord for sponsoring. Anyway, let's get back to the tier list. Right, so I think I'm gonna keep going with just rank most of the high tiers, and then we can kind of delve into the bottom tiers later, because I do think most people care mostly about the top tiers at this point. Fox, obviously a top tier. I'm kind of gonna talk very lightly about these characters first, and then I'm gonna go into who I think is the best later, because I think that's a really hard discussion, whereas I think it's really easy to put Fox just as one of the best characters. Sheik, also one of the best characters. Marth, also one of the best characters. Zelda, second worst character in the game. Terrible, shitty movement. Only good attacks in my opinion are like back air, fair, down smash, and dash attack, which is not enough to play. Like, Zelda can win for sure. She's a lot better than Bowser, like a lot. And I think you can win with any character in Melee, but I do think Zelda is very bad. Falco, also an amazing character. Obviously one of the best. Falcon, one of the best. Now, what I will say is I do not think Falcon is in a different tier than Fox, Marth, and Sheik. Same thing with Puff. I think they're all actually in the same tier. You could argue, in my opinion, that there's an S plus or an S minus tier. But what I honestly think is I think the level is so close, and the only real question is not, is Falcon viable, but is he a contender for the best character in the game? Could he be the #1? I don't actually think the strength difference is big, but I do think Falcon has a really hard argument for #1. So that's why he's in the same tier, but he's lower. Donkey Kong. I think Donkey Kong is probably one of the most underrated characters in the game currently. He is really hard to hit properly because he is so heavy. He does have a big hurt box, and his recovery is not amazing, but neither is Falcon's. Bad recoveries does not mean you are instantly terrible. And his punish game is absolutely ridiculous. Like, he murders people if he gets the right hit. Like, if you get a grab or an upper, they can just die. His only real problem is that he struggles when he's front turn. So fair, nair are not very good attacks, and his shield is a little pokeable, although you can work around that. And yeah, as we said, his recovery is not great. I would also add that his edge guarding is really mid. It's definitely not top tier. Like, he kind of struggles with gimping. Some characters just get in way easier against Donkey Kong than they do against others. So it still keeps him solely in mid tier, but I do think he's the best character in mid. I would say Ganondorf is probably right after him. Ganon has more... His punish game is a lot worse than Donkey Kong. Like, a lot worse if you spread it out over the entire cast. But there are matchups where Ganondorf has like an amazing chain grab and his attacks do have better priority. But I think Donkey Kong's better movement and better fully optimized punish game is better in the long run. I think a mistake a lot of people do when they rank the lower characters is that very few people main Donkey Kong, Ganondorf, Zelda, Bowser, etc. And so what they do is that they underrate the hard characters, because when you play these characters, you usually just play them for a couple games, like in between. I'm just gonna try Zelda out for a couple games and then you go back to your main, right? And I think Zelda, for example, is a lot better when you play her like that, like a couple games at a time, every full moon, compared to a character like Ness or Kirby, who takes significantly more skill to play and you need more time. But at max proficiency, if you main them, or at the very least secondary them, so you play them every single day, I think then they go up a lot. And obviously this tier list is for top level competition, for which character to main or secondary, not which character to dabble with 5 games. I think Dr. Mario is an A. I think Dr. Mario is very good actually. He doesn't have any insane strengths, you might think, but he does one thing that is really underrated. Almost no character can combo Dr. Mario really easily. And his recovery is actually not bad at all. That's a very common misconception. It's decent at like recovering at high percent, but it's especially good at low percent. Like, if it's really hard to kill Dr. Mario at 0 because of his up B, because of his ledge snap. Yeah, killing Dr. Mario at 0 is seriously hard, and ultimately what your recovery wants to do is make you live longer. Next up we have Ices. I would say this is S-. I think Ice Climbers are actually really good, but the biggest problem with Ice Climbers is that they can't beat a Peach that knows the matchup, or a Puff that knows the matchup. At least not without wobbling. And wobbling is currently not legal. If they have wobbling, I think they're up here. No discussion. I think they might even, like, I actually think with what we know now, and with how good plays like Slug are right now, I think with wobbling, there's an argument that they're like contender for the best in the game almost. Not just barely top tier, but like solidly in the fight. I think they're really good. I love watching Slug play. Might not be the most fun to play against, but watching Slug beat people like top level players, it's so cool to see. Especially because he's so good with solo Popo. You can tell that it's not just the grabs, which are still really good even without wobbling. Kirby, I would put in C tier. Actually solidly better than Bowser and Zelda in my opinion, because Kirby has a lot of decent moves and really good wave dash, good crouch, some good frame data. Just struggles because of bad movement, honestly. That's the main thing, and bad grabs. Has a really good like grab range, but the throws themselves really suck against most characters, and that really hurts him. If Kirby had good throws, it'd be like he'd almost be mid tier, I think. Link is somewhere in B as well. I would say lower end though. It's hard for me to rank Mario. I don't think you can honestly justify him being that much worse, so he's probably about here, I would say. He could be better than DK. It's honestly really hard to say because the best players with Mario just play Doc, because obviously he's just a better version. I wouldn't really say there's any matchup that Doc does worse than either. I think that's copium for the most part. Luigi is also up here. I think Luigi is also a character that people give a lot of shit, but I actually think is very strong, but does lose almost all top tier matchups, or if not all matchups. I don't think any of them are unwinnable though, like not a single one. Fox is not unwinnable, Marth is not unwinnable, Sheik is not unwinnable, Puff is not unwinnable, but I do think it's like, it feels like he loses like 6-4 to everyone in the top tier, which does add up really quickly. People have been saying recently, I've heard that Ices kind of get bodied by Luigi now, so I can see that be the top tier matchup he wins if you consider Ices top tier. Mewtwo, I think, is actually borderline A. I would say he's like A-. I think Mewtwo is seriously underrated. Like, I'm gonna put him in B because otherwise people are gonna flip their shit without listening to the explanation by skipping to the end of the video. But I think he's like right on the cusp. I think Mewtwo is really hard to play properly, and he's terrible if you play him for a couple games, but I think he's really underrated. Seriously, a really good character compared to the rest of the mid tiers. Has no unwinnable matchup. The only one that I think is truly awful is Peach in my opinion, and maybe Ices, but I don't think Ices should be that bad with no Wobbling. So honestly, it's just Peach in my opinion. I myself play a decent amount of Mewtwo, especially before, and I think some of the problems that people say he's bad against is just not real. That he can't dash dance or like he can't play neutral. Yes, like some of the worst neutral because his tail, but like when you're at really high level Mewtwo, you just don't face your opponent that often if you're scared of your tail getting hit. Like you mainly do wave dash or stay in the air with Mewtwo. And his punish game on spaces is really strong, his edge guarding is good, his recovery is amazing. I actually think he's a really solid character, just barely not worth playing in my opinion, especially as a Solomid. Game & Watch, I would say, is somewhere around here. Really strong hitboxes, but ultimately too few good moves. But basically plays like a way stronger version of like Zelda almost, which just like has a couple area hitboxes, but way better movement, way better grabs, way better jab, way better up tilt. Decent recovery, I would say. Like good edge guarding, like significantly better than the bad characters. I would honestly put him in B now that I think about it, because I don't know if he has that many flaws outside of just being light and having a weak shield. But I think especially in these days you can just use like the light shield modifiers where you mid shield, like you get a shield that's not quite a regular shield, that's a little bit above, to where shield poking him goes a lot harder without getting all the negatives of a full light shield. I think Ness is here, however, but I do think Ness is significantly better than Kirby. Ness's movement with double jump canceling and stuff like that is really good. Has actual good priority on a lot of things, but just low overall range. But I think if you're really sick at microspacing and you're just technical, you can definitely put some work in with Ness. Doesn't have super Omega terrible top tier matchups in my opinion, but obviously does really struggle if you hit him off stage. Like his recovery is really bad. Pichu is also here. I think Pichu is probably better than Kirby. Yeah, just definitely not unwinnable, but has too few good moves, kind of like Game & Watch, but is even lighter and doesn't have the priority of Game & Watch. Is fast though, but kind of really struggles because Pichu has no real grab range. Yeah, also not that good at edge guarding. That's also a problem Ness has, by the way. Bad edge guarding due to bad recovery. Roy, I think, is up here. I definitely don't think Roy is along with Ness and Kirby, although I might be capping. Maybe Roy is here. I don't know. The B and C tiers are pretty close, honestly, especially the lower end. But I would probably put Roy here. I think Roy is like, he has so many of the good parts of Marth that he can't be a terrible character. The only strategy you can really abuse against him is some characters can really make him pay for not having a strong aerial and use platforms a lot. But I don't think it's actually as bad for Roy to get platform camp as many people say, simply because most characters can't hit him if he's just dash dancing and they're on the platforms. So you're gonna have to make some kind of risk eventually to hit him. But obviously it does hurt that they can kind of recover high, they can land on platforms, they can use platforms to attack from. But I don't think it's an auto win. And saying this obviously showed that you can still beat top 20 level players with Roy, which is kind of insane. But I think that just speaks to how surprisingly well balanced Melee is in some ways, while also being terribly balanced for the low bad characters. What I would honestly say is just that like the characters are much worse and there's no reason to play the bad characters. But so many core mechanics of Melee, like CC, dash dance, DI, and it's such a skillful game and you can beat people that are slightly worse than you really hard, to the point where like it is badly balanced in the way that there's no reason to play the bad characters, but you can win with the bad characters, no problem. If you're the better player, you will win a ton of your games, even with a bad character in a bad matchup. I think Young Link is actually probably here. He's also really bad, actually. Like I do not understand why people say that Young Link is like secret boss or something. I think he just struggles due to not having strong moves that break CC and shit like that. Does have better movement than Link though. I would actually kind of put, I think I would do like this. I think Link is still slightly better though than Link due to having more weight, better priority, and just living like stronger moves. But I think they both kind of suffer from a lot of the same problems. Just being bad in close quarters, not having good frame data, and not having like a quick launcher. If they had like Roy down tilt or Game Watch down tilt or a normal grab, I think that'd be a lot better. Alright, I think that's all the bad characters out of the way. Now, I'm kind of undecided here because I think you can do this tier list in two ways. You can either just have a huge S tier, or you can make a contender for number 1. But I think the thing is, for me, is that I don't think contender for number 1 means that you're actually much better than the characters that can't be number 1. I just think there's no good argument for them to be the best. So I think I'm actually going to keep it here because I think it's the most accurate representation. I truly do not think that Melee is that unbalanced. Maybe that's crazy to most people who have heard stories of Fox Final Destination No Ines, but I really don't think it's that unbalanced. I really don't think that like Fox, Puff, Marth are that much better than characters like Yoshi, Pikachu, Peach, Ices, Samus. I think you can start off with an easy one. I think Samus is over here. Has some bad matchups and arguably loses to all top tiers, but also no unwinnable matchups. Yeah, definitely not a bad character. Solid spread overall, but doesn't really do super well against anyone. Kind of the opposite, in my opinion, of Pikachu. I would say Pikachu is actually S- tier. The only real problem with Pikachu is the Puff and Peach matchups, in my opinion. So the reason why it's so hard to rank Pikachu is because solo Pikachu, I would say, could almost be A or worse than Ices, but I think Pikachu with the secondary is solidly S-. And I think if you're investing your time wisely, you should have a secondary as a Pikachu player. Playing against Ices, playing against Peach and Puff just are not worth it with Pikachu, but I think every other matchup is completely fine with Pikachu. I think there's an argument that Pikachu beats both Falcon and Marth, which is maybe surprising to some of you, but I think it actually holds some water. The one that most people accept is Marth, that there's a possibility that he could beat Marth. I think it's probably even, or maybe slight Marth favor, but I can't say for sure. And I don't think the matchup has been developed enough to where we really know. Pikachu is also a character that benefits from better controllers, box controllers, so we have to wait a little bit more to see how much that pushes the character. So I would say, I'm gonna do with ranges here, I would say Pikachu is from S- to A+. Next up we have Peach. Peach is the most underrated character in the game. Or maybe not even underrated, because I think most people inherently know that she's good, but the Peach players downplay her. They act like they're playing Zelda when they're playing Peach. I think Peach is definitely up here, like 100%. I think I could see both worse and better than Falcon, actually. I think some of the new developments that Peach can do with box lock controllers, with new controllers, using Z-jump, sub floats, all that stuff, I think is really good. And I actually think there's a reality where Peach is better than Falco. I think it could be true. I don't know. I think Falco kind of struggles against the floaties. Like, I think Falco loses to Peach and Puff and maybe Sheik. It's a possibility at least. And I think Peach shits on every non-top S tier character. Like, if you go Peach, Ices, 9-1 matchup. Peach, Pikachu, A2. Samus, bad. Luigi, bad. Like, everyone but the actual best characters are just extremely free for Peach. Even like characters like Yoshi really struggle against Peach in my opinion. Whereas I think Falco could lose to a Doc, could lose to a Luigi, could lose to a Samus, could lose to an Ices, could lose to a Pikachu. And I'm not sure if the slightly better S tier spread necessarily means that he is better, but he does have a lot higher potential. So it really comes down to whether or not you value ease of use, and I think Peach is definitely easier to use. Peach has some really hard things, but if you feel like you're playing bad, you can choose an easy option, or if you're ahead by a lot and do 90% of the job. Whereas I feel like with Falco, if you do the easy option, you're usually cutting your efficiency by much more. Yeah. But I would honestly say Peach is worse than Falcon. I would. But, sorry, worse than Falco. But I do think it's surprisingly close. And don't believe Peach players when they say that she's terrible. Don't. The only matchup in S tier that's bad for her, truly bad, is Puff. And Puff is also winnable. It is bad. But needing a secondary for Puff is not a Peach specific thing in my opinion. I think with the results that many of the other characters are showing as Puff, I think there's an argument that both Sheik and Falco players should also counterpick against Puff. And especially characters like Ices and Pikachu. I think she's really good. I think she still has a lot of potential to grow. Definitely don't sleep on Peach. Next up, before we go into the nitty gritty of like talking ranges, but yeah, I think Peach's range could essentially be from here, from what is it, 5th best in the game, or the 8th best in the game. Or no, 1, 2, 3. I can't count. 7th best. I would say that's her range. Next up, we have maybe the biggest surprise to people, the most controversial thing, and it's Yoshi. And I think Yoshi is an S. I actually think he's an S. I've always been a Yoshi believer. This is not because Amsa just won a major. I want that to be clear. This is actually because I think box Yoshi, like box control Yoshi, has some really big improvements. And I think I've always been a Yoshi believer, and I think the way that the controllers work, because Yoshi is one of the hardest characters to play. He's so hard to play. And anything that makes hard characters easier is a big buff to them, right? I think that's pretty obvious. But box controls are much easier and much better. So I think increased consistency really helps Yoshi. I'm personally gonna pick up a secondary Yoshi again for fun once rank comes out. A lot of people saw things such as, like, let's say Sheik against Yoshi. It used to be like seen as an 8-2 matchup. Yoshi used to be, for reference, considered to be down here, or maybe even here before. And I don't think people realize that with how the game has developed, the fact that she can get a 0 to 50 or maybe 60 shin grab, before it was like, damn, this is the best combo we'll ever have, maybe of all time. 0 to 60 and it's relatively easy. Now with better DI, maybe usually you don't even get 50. But even if you do, because the punish game is so much better, the fact that you don't die from, like, you get grabbed by your opponent's best starter and you're kind of guaranteed not to die, is a huge difference nowadays compared to before, where the better we get, the less percent kind of means in a way, and the more kill opportunities, like how many reads do I need to do to actually take a stock on average. And I think Yoshi is one of the characters that really benefits from this. Yoshi can take so many hits. He has, you know, great CC and double jump armor, and then he also has parry and the best shield drop. And I think even on FD, he doesn't really lose that bad due to having, like, surprisingly good movement and just generally spacing and footsies. Yeah, I think he's just clearly better than Isis and Pikachu, to the point where I can't consider them the same tier. Because Yoshi has no matchup you have to counterpick for. Isis, you have to counterpick for Peach. Pikachu, you probably have to counterpick for Peach and Puff, even if they're not as bad as Isis and Puff. Isis Peach. And I don't think you can justify a character that is winning majors, but has really good results still, because yes, there's only one Yoshi player, but I don't think that's the character's fault. I think that's just him being hard and very few people liking the playstyle Yoshi needs. Similarly to how there's very few Puffs, even though Puff is amazing. I think Yoshi's very strong, can only go up still. I would say the range is somewhere around here, but I think it's unrealistic that Yoshi becomes better than Falco on paper, or like better than Peach. I think I accept the characters. But I do think that in practice, because most people don't know how to fight Yoshi, Yoshi feels just as strong as many of the other top tiers, because you have that advantage of the Yoshi player has 5,000 hours against Fox, and the Fox player has never played a good Yoshi. I do think that matters when we're talking practicality. If Yoshi was more played, I think he feels weaker, but I still think he's S. Alright, so I think that's mostly it. I think we can talk a little bit about Falcon. I think Falcon's very strong. The Falco matchup is his biggest flaw, but I don't think Falco is super common at top level, so it's not terrible. He loses to Sheik, he loses to Puff, wins against Peach, most likely. Just fighting against Marth and fighting against Fox, but also wins against Yoshi. The biggest strength that Falcon has, in my opinion, is, and it's gonna hurt a lot of Falcon players deeply, but he's very, very simple. I didn't say easy. I think no character top level melee is easy, but I do think he's very simple. Yes, you do have to be fast. Yes, he doesn't win every matchup, but the amount of moves Falcon uses is closer to Zelda's than it is Fox. You can do really well with Falcon if you only use grab, jab, and aerials. You can do very, very well. Much, much better than doing that for any other character. Falcon no doubt has the best punish game in the game. Combos spaceys, floaties, everyone. There's not a single character that can play against Falcon and be like, yeah, I'll just take the hit. You know what? Hit me with an aerial. It's not that big of a deal. Boom. You stomp, knee, whatever. Yes, has very bad recovery. And that's kind of it for weaknesses in my opinion. Maybe doesn't have the best outer shield game, but not a bad one either. Very heavy, lives very long, good edge guarding, but not super S tier edge guarding. Like if you compare his edge guarding compared to the contenders for number 1, yes, he does have worse edge guarding, but again, best punish game overall still. Right, so let's try to order the last characters. I think Falco is a character that is really, really hard to rank. Falcon's range, by the way, is, in my opinion, here to here. I don't see him being worse than Yoshi, but I guess it's possible if Falco's like super prevalent in the meta. But I also struggle seeing Falcon better than Puff, Sheik, Marth, or Fox. Even Falco, I would honestly say it's hard. I think he's a bit more like, because he's so simple, I think it's easier to rank him, and I do think he's worse. I think he has a very good chance of being better than Peach, but I think he has a very low chance of being better than Falco, like lower than Peach. So basically, more pigeonholed and not as much room to grow as a character like Peach, and especially Falco. Falco has an argument for just winning neutral against everyone and just beating every character in the game, in my opinion, if you get good enough with laser control and pressure and combos. But he also has an argument for being kind of overrated and just not stable enough, not doing well enough to against the floaty part of the cast. I do think that right now Falco beats Fox in tournament. Maybe that's controversial, but I do think that is the case. I think against Falco, Fox has to play a very hard game, and I think against Fox, Falco has a pretty simple, not easy, simpler time. And I think that's why so many players of Falco are really good against Fox. However, Falco has a much more complicated game plan against some characters like Peach, like Puff, than Fox does. Much, much more complicated. So I do think he still is very similar in difficulty to Fox, but playing Falco against Falcon and Fox I think is very easy, or like slightly easier, I would say. He wins those matchups, but outside of Fox and Falcon and maybe Yoshi, I don't know if he beats any top tiers, man. He could, but I'm not sure. That said, Falco's not a bad character, and I do still think he has room to grow, but I just think that he kind of needs more time, because we need to figure out if his laser game and his pressure game is actually that good, if box controls can take him to the next level, etc., or if he's just been a like kind of overrated character that's carried due to Fox and Falcon being common, and like characters like Sheik and Marth and Puff and Peach not being good enough in the matchup. But yeah, no, Falco is still definitely an S tier, incredible character, has an argument for being the best character in the game. His range, in my opinion, is from worse than Peach all the way to number 1. That is how hard melee is to judge, in my opinion. You could make an argument that Falco is the best character in the game, or the 6th best character in the game, and I don't think any of them is actually crazy. Next up, we have Jigglypuff. Jigglypuff is another character with a decent amount of range, but I think it's hard to argue that she's lower than 5th, And I also think there's a solid argument that with the current rule set, she is by far the best character in the game, like S+ tier. If you play Jigglypuff, maximum abuse. You look up the rule set for every tournament and you try to abuse the ledge grab limit as much as possible. You try to time people out. You try to lead air camp any character you can. I think Puff is definitely the best character in the game, and I do not think it's close. With a proper rule set, I think she's still arguably the best character in the game due to being simple, having no bad matchups, Fox being the worst, probably, and it's still maximum 5-5, 4-5 for Fox. Maximum. And beating a ton of characters kind of for free. Like, she kind of has the Peach thing where you don't even need to know a lot of the matchups. Like against Peach, you kind of just win for free. Super simple character. Is the only character that requires very little tech skill. Honestly, less than some ultimate characters, as Smash 4 characters. As crazy as that is to say, and I think that's a huge benefit when practicing because you can spend so much more time learning matchups, learning player habits, thinking about how to perform well, rather than practicing tech skill like every other character has to do. Still has hard things, don't get me wrong, it is still melee, but the basic game plan is very easy. Her game plan is very simple throughout the cast, to where she doesn't play that different from top tier to top tier, which is a huge benefit compared to characters like Falco or Peach, Fox, or Yoshi, where they have to play completely different depending on who they're facing. And obviously that means that every skill you learn is more commonly used, which means you can improve faster, etc. And I also think Puff just benefits from tournaments and controllers and the community at large just being kind of grassroots and shitty. If you travel and you get no jet lag and you get jet lagged out the ass. Now American players don't really travel, but if they did, it's bad, right? It's real bad. You're playing Wars, you're playing off, you're missing your shit. Puff is the best character to play, by far. If the venue goes cold because it's bad AC, this happened at Big House, not the most recent one, but it's happened at many tournaments. Who's the best character to play with cold hands? Jigglypuff. If your controller breaks the day before, like mine has done many times, and yeah, you have a spare, but you're not used to the spare, because it can take weeks to get used to a new controller melee. Who is the best character? Jigglypuff. If the schedule is bad, if you have to jump between ultimate and melee, or doubles and singles, who is the best character? Jigglypuff. Basically, I think the factor of Jigglypuff being the best comes down to external circumstances, and I think, yeah, the benefit might not be huge. It's not like, oh, because you have one temperature lower, now Jigglypuff Fox is 7-3 for Jigs, but I do think that it is enough to, in an otherwise super tight race of top tiers, it is enough, in my opinion, to make Jigglypuff a contender for #1. That said, I do think that the addition of Slippy and box controllers hurt her slightly. People being more technical, people getting more chances to play against Puff does help them play against Puff. Before I had to fly people out just to practice against Puff, and that was obviously really, really bad. Because most people could not afford that, or were just not willing to spend the money practicing against one character. So I am slightly lower on Jigglypuff now, where before I would say she's the front runner for being #1. And now I think there's basically no way to say if she's #1 or if she's #4 or 3. I would say with 90% likelihood, Jigglypuff is either 3rd, 2nd, or 1st. That is my opinion. I think there's almost no way that she's lower than 4th, but it is a possibility. And I would say the possibility that she's the best just ranges from how good the tournament, how good the settings are. Maybe I'll change my mind. Oh, and also, of course, the rule set. No airtime limit and no ledge grab limit makes her completely broken. Next up, we have Sheik. And I think Sheik actually has the most interesting case for #1. I've been playing a lot of Sheik recently. I'm not just talking out of my ass. I think if you can reaction tech chase Fox and Falco to, like, a really high degree, like as high as Wistrope can, or maybe slightly better, I think there's an argument, a very strong one, that she is the best character in the game. Hear me out. I think no tech chases missed, Sheik absolutely beats Falco and Fox. And absolutely, like, no way in hell Falcon wins. I don't think this is actually that much of an argument, because I think that those characters just can't punish Sheik nearly as guaranteed as full reaction tech is. I still think Sheik has a lot of optimization to do against Fox and Falco, but I think the punish game for Sheik versus Fox and Falco is really freaking hard. Really freaking hard. Like, the hardest punish game on spaces in the entire game is definitely Sheik, simply due to how hard it is to be consistent on the reaction tech chase. But I think, especially with box controls being better at reaction tech chasing, I actually think there's a way where Sheik wins against both Fox and Falco. But more likely though, I think she beats Falco and goes even with Fox. Now, what character beats Sheik then? Probably Puff. I would say very likely Puff, 55-45 or maybe 6-4 even in Puff's favor. But you could argue that maybe, you know, during perfect conditions, Puff is going to lose to all the Foxes, and so Sheik being better against Fox and Marth and Falco and maybe arguably Peach, probably better against Falcon, probably better against Yoshi, outweighs the fact that Puff is easier and wins the Sheik matchup. I would say the Marth matchup is really hard to judge. I think both me and Zane agree that it's either 55-45 in Sheik's favor or in Marth's favor, or even. So basically there's a 10-point swing there, and if Sheik ends up beating Marth like 55-45, and you make an argument that Marth beats Spaceys, and maybe even Puff, then is it she the best? Is that crazy to say? If Sheik beats the otherwise quote-unquote best character and goes even with Fox, then she's the best, right? But again, this all depends on how her Puff matchup is, how much you can push reaction tech chasing, if it's a possibility that Sheik beats Fox and Falco due to having perfect reaction tech chasing. Right now, she's 4th in my opinion, or maybe 5th after Falco. In the future, who knows? I'm definitely going to explore more matchups with Sheik. Currently, I only play her against Marth, but I might pick her up in some matchups like Pikachu Yoshi, and maybe on specific stages like against Peach on FD, against Falcon maybe. So yeah, I'm really interested to see where Sheik goes. I think she's a deceptively really hard character to play at top level. Not easy at all, but if you just looked at it once, it'd be silly how easy she looks at low level. But at top level, very hard, very complicated due to having the weird dashes, short hops, all that shit. Also benefits from a better controller. I don't think the box controls that we currently have are very good for Sheik. They're better, but if she has one like a Smashbox or one with custom firmware that's tailor-made for Sheik, like the boxes for Fox, I think she could definitely make some huge improvements from that. Next up, we have Marth. Marth is actually the character that I think has the strongest case for being the best character to play if you want to win. And that is simply due to Fox being the most common character in top 32s. I think people are gonna say, oh, well, Zane lost to Mango, he lost to Cody. Yes, he did. I still think that Marth wins. It is 6-4, or maybe 55-45, or maybe better, but it's 6-4, not 10-0. Zane losing a couple times is expected. He's playing against the best players in the world. That does not change the matchup by itself. I do also think Zane, until very recently, has had some issues in how he plays against Fox, to where if we had more top level Marths, I think it would be more obvious. I also think Marth really benefits from box controllers and FOPs. Zane is still on an OEM or an original controller, so that's also something that could improve. And it has a very solid case of not losing a single matchup the entire game. The strongest case, in my opinion, for not having a single losing matchup. Now, do you value having stomping matchups more than no losing matchup? I think that depends. I think for me, I value having no losing matchups because that means you can play a solo main more reliably. But to some people, they would rather play, you know, like Mewtwo King, they would rather play Marth in the best matchup for Marth and then play Sheik to beat the bad matchups. Or they would play like I do, play Fox and then Sheik in some matchups. So yeah, I think Marth's range is from 3 or 4th, you know, somewhere in the top 4 as well. I think that in general, when you look at these characters, the only one that I think is slightly weaker of the 4, or maybe even 5, like if you include Falco, is Sheik. Sheik and Falco, I think, are in their own, like, could be number 1, but have a worse case for number 1. And then I think we come down to the last character. The most played character, the best designed fighting game character of all time, in my opinion, Fox McCloud. how lucky are we to have Fox as one of the best characters? If you don't play more fighting games, you have no freaking idea how lucky we are to have Fox. Fox is such a well-designed character in that he's almost always considered to be both very fun to play. You can play it in many different ways. There's an infinite ceiling, but you can also get shit on by any character. You can lose with Fox to freaking Zelda, Roy, Bowser, Pichu. But you could also make even the best characters look like they have no chance. Yes, he is very played, and of course not everyone's going to love playing against him, but I do think he is the best character to probably be #1 or contender for #1 of all time. I think if Fox was a bad character and we had, let's say this is the reality, and we have no Spaceys, and we have Falcon Puff or Marth Puff or Marth Sheik, Marth Peach as the most common matchups, and not Fox Falco or Fox Marth, I don't think Melee is alive today. I think come Ultimate or Smash 4 or Brawl, we would have just kind of left it, because I think in many ways Spaceys are what are the most outstanding Melee characters. That doesn't mean Melee and Marth and Sheik don't play Melee, but I think it's the biggest contrast from the games that came later, like Smash 4 Brawl and Ultimate. Love Fox. I think ranking Fox is so freaking hard. I think right now I put him at second best. I think he has a solid argument for anywhere in top 3 and maybe 4th if Sheik and Falco just go nuts in development. Box controls help him for sure, but I do also think that he actually gets really heavily nerfed by box controllers because he is the top tier that is the most susceptible to smash DI and reaction text chasing, and both those things are much better with box controllers. Yeah, if you want me to make a more in-depth guide of going through every character's matchups and stuff like that, I'm considering making a video series that's just called like the best character in Melee, Fox McCloud, Marth, Puff, where we just go through each matchup, every character, why they have the case for #1, what can the players improve. Consider doing that, or maybe that's just way too nerdy and no one else cares, it's just me. I'm gonna add for all have a case for #1, and I think that I'm gonna leave it at that. Subscribe, check out NordVPN, all that shit. Goodbye YouTube.